said it correctly.
Yes, you did.
Senate.
Well, as Steve said, our state is great. Having said that, though, we have some challenges, to say the very least. I think that most people are aware that probably budget is the biggest challenge the state has right now. And the consequences of us not having a balanced budget are pretty significant and severe. I think one of the scariest things that's due to the budget impasse, and I'll connect those dots in a minute, is the fact that people are leaving this state. So the demographics that the University of Illinois collects, as well as a survey that was recently done by the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute of Southern Illinois, indicated that not only are people leaving, but 49% of the people who live in this state want to leave. That's a scary number. And it's not just snowbirds who are tired of shoveling. It's millennials, and it is working people who are at the peak of their career. Why do they want to leave? A couple reasons. One, it's hard for them to get a job in this state. I think a lot of the policies that have been implemented over the years, particularly in the Chicago region, don't welcome companies to come here to grow, to expand, to create jobs. And so it's harder to get a job here than it is in other areas. Secondly, people find they can have a better lifestyle in other areas. You know, you can go to some of the Sun Belt areas like Texas, Arizona. You can get a house, a 4-bedroom house, 3 bathrooms, and pay $3,000 or $4,000 in taxes. A home like that, as you know, in this area, you'd be paying probably $10,000 to $15,000 a year. So people look at that and think, I can have a better lifestyle somewhere else. So we are really in a pickle. The question is, one, what do we do to get out of it? And you know, how do we solve this problem? So I think, you know, those questions are very intricately related. And let me just back up for a couple of seconds in terms of other issues going on in the state. There are lots of other issues. I mean, we talk about workers' compensation, we talk about the lawsuit atmosphere, we talk about energy policy here in Illinois. All of those issues, though, are kind of on hold. So there's nothing really being decided in terms of forward-thinking public policy, which is another problem. We're just stuck in this stasis of not having anything happen. That goes to the political side. So like it or not, we have a democracy. There's two parties. And in Illinois, the Democrats have had control, certainly the Cook County and metro area for 80 years. And they've had effective control of the State House because they've had the Speaker of the House for the last 40 years. In my opinion, those policies that they've put into place haven't worked very well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the state that we're in. So when the governor ran, he said, yeah, you know, this is a tough problem. I'm going to come in, and I'm even willing to look at our tax structure here in Illinois. But I sure as heck am not going to ask anybody to pay any more money unless there's some significant and fundamental changes in the way we do business here. Enter Mike Madigan. He's not so interested in fundamental change. I mean, to be perfectly honest, the status quo has served him pretty well. He's been in power for a long, long time. A lot of people owe their jobs, their livelihoods to him. A lot of industries have been able to work with him to get things the way they want it. The problem is a lot of those folks are the insiders, and for the rest of us who are, you know, just trying to eke out a living, it's not working so well. So Rauner, because he has both chambers of the legislature in the Democrat Party, it's very difficult for him to be proactive in moving the agenda that he wanted, because in order to do that, you have to have either President Cullerton, who's a Democrat, or the Speaker call a bill, and then it has to be voted on. So even things that might pass, even amongst rank and file Democrats, don't even get voted on. When the governor tries to advance a piece of legislation, it's pretty well legislatively blocked. So what he's been trying to do is figure out what changes can he make without the legislature. And he's had a lot of opportunity to do changes in terms of who heads up, for example, the Department of Human Services. Today he had a press conference on the Medicaid program and ways that he thinks that we can improve that and do it more cost effectively and begin to include things like mental health treatment under the umbrella of managed care. But the opportunities to fundamentally change the state without the legislature are very, very difficult, to be honest. So maybe we haven't seen quite as much progress as we would have hoped. I supported Governor Rauner. I really think we need a change in direction. I don't think we can afford 4 more years of the status quo. And I'm not willing to pay any more taxes unless something's different, period, the end. And that's what I get from most people that I speak with. So here we are at the election, and what Mike Madigan essentially said last spring was, we're not going to talk about anything until after the election. So just don't even bother talking about policy, what we could do to improve the state. We're not doing it until after the election. What he's looking at is, will he gain seats, which I think he thinks he may, and we'll go into how the federal election is affecting all of this. Or will Rauner gain seats vis-a-vis Republicans gaining seats in the legislature? Now, I think Republicans will gain, certainly in the Senate will gain at least 1, maybe 2 or 3. In the House, they may gain a couple. My fear is that's not a big enough message to Mike Madigan that he needs to engage with the governor. And that what he's going to do is just push off this discussion for another 2 years into the gubernatorial election. Now, the problem with doing that is we don't have a budget. Well, so what? I mean, if you don't rely on services from the state, maybe that doesn't bother you particularly. But by passing only half a budget, which is what we did, it wasn't for half a year. It was only half the things the state has to pay for. The problem is we're still paying for everything, and we have no control over it. It's continuing appropriations, which are laws that say we have to pay something, court orders, and consent decrees, which are, again, a legal issue. So every single day that we don't take control of this budget and do things differently, we are digging the hole $13 million a day deeper, which is really scary because if this goes on for another 2 years, we don't not only have to fix the future, but we have a giant repair job to do on the back end. And here's where that affects businesses coming in. They see that. They know that Illinois has a huge problem and it's getting worse by the day, and that other shoe's going to drop sooner or later, and they don't want to drop it on them. So if they have a choice to go to a state like Illinois or a state like Indiana, Iowa, Arizona, Texas, they're choosing the other states, and they're taking those jobs, which comes full circle back to what I said, people are leaving the state. It's a very scary situation. Again, this election, and then I'm going to stop talking and take questions, but one other influence that we need to look at on the state, which is what I'm far more informed on. So I really don't ask me about a lot of federal issues because that's not my bailiwick, so to speak. But the federal election will affect the state elections. So remember when I told you we need more balance, maybe we need some more Republicans? There's a lot of Democrats that don't like Hillary. There's a lot of Republicans that don't care for Trump. And the big question is, are people just throwing up their hands and saying, I'm staying home. I don't care. It doesn't matter what I say. And then we won't have the opportunity to change that balance. So we're definitely going to be affected by what's at the top of the ticket as we try to move forward to solve the problems here in Illinois. So.
Chris, so you're talking about how we all kind of see what Madigan's end game is as far as holding. But so say he holds out and he gets the governorship back to the Democrats, what's he going to do then? I mean, so he's got that power back. Is he just going to double the taxes? Or, I mean, he's got to have something in mind on how we get out of this, I would think.
Well, it's getting more and more difficult every day to get out of it. First of all, we have to make the pension payments. What's killing us, though, is, for example, in the Medicaid program, he introduced today this a Medicaid waiver, so asking the federal government to do things more efficiently. He's trying to hold the cost of that program down. Right now, that program is being run by court orders and consent decrees. So no one's managing it, and in fact, a lot of the Democrats are fine with that because they get paid more. It isn't necessarily in the best interest of a few people to change the way we do business drastically. And just to use healthcare as an example, I mean, to the extent you keep people out of hospitals, that's good for people, but it's not necessarily good for the bottom line of hospitals. And so those are sort of the competing interests that we have to work on. And that's one area where he is trying to save money. He's talked a lot about pension reform. There's three things that impact that. Pensions are one of the biggest problems we have in the state. They were not adequately funded for many years. And oftentimes the unions were okay with that, even though they're screaming now. Why were they okay with that? Because rather than putting the money in the bank for the pensions, they got to spend it on salaries and the day-to-day basis. So unions were complicit in all of this. Nonetheless, it's a problem. And there's only three ways to fix this. You can fix it by, if the actuarial assumptions change, so if fewer people retire or people die younger, well, guess what? We're going the other way. I mean, people are living longer, so that's not good. You can reduce benefits, but the Supreme Court has essentially said you can't reduce benefits. And even changing the Constitution, the thinking is you can't change it out from under people. They're still going to be covered by the old Constitution. Or then, what happens with investment returns is the other way. So, we don't have a lot of flexibility there to fix the problem. There are some things we can do, such as capping the pensionable salary, but then making a local, say you have a village manager, which I know this wouldn't happen here, who was making $500,000. The state would only be, this is not a good example, wouldn't be a village manager. Say a physician at the University of Illinois Hospital making $500,000. If they cap the pensionable salary at $110,000, then the U of I would be responsible for any additional pension. What that has the effect of doing is holding salaries down. Same way, school superintendents who get large salaries, their pensionable salary that the state is responsible for will be capped. The school district is responsible for the rest. That still leaves some exposure, though, to increased property taxes, because there are school districts, boards that will go ahead and do that. It's not a guarantee. So we can do some of that to fix it. We have closed the door on the very high pensions. We passed what's called Tier 2. So people coming to work now for the state and teachers are not getting the kinds of pension benefits that people were getting 20 years ago. So, we've got the Python, this thing has to kind of work its way through the Python, and then we'll be in better shape, but that's going to take 40 years until the people in the system now are all gone. So that's a significant problem. One area that the governor has made some progress in and should elicit some savings is technology. If you can imagine, a lot of the computer systems in the state of Illinois, this is incredible, we're using COBOL programming. I mean, they had to call people out of retirement to work on the computers. The Department of Human Services didn't talk to the Department of Public Health. So people that were caught in maybe both of those systems, they don't talk to each other, so benefits weren't well coordinated. It's possible that people were getting more than we should have been sending out the door. That the governor is fixing. There's a major investment in technology. Interestingly, though, the pushback on that, it comes from the unions, because to the extent people aren't physically moving a paper from here to there, and it's just going with the touch of a button, that's jobs. So there's some pushback there. We don't have a lot of state employees compared to other states. They are well paid compared to other states, and the governor's trying to get a more reasonable contract. The last round, because the unions were involved in, as they always are in the election cycle, they offer very large raises in exchange basically for support. I mean, it's a very unholy conflict of interest. But the governor's trying to work out, the union contracts with the state employees, and we'll see where that goes. I mean, that's an important cost. But the bigger cost is everything we do on contract, and that would be like human services, mental health, Medicaid, where we don't employ the doctor that provides the Medicaid for someone who's in need. We contract with them, and that's where we also have a lot of costs and a lot of special interests where we have, we're paying in many instances more than other states are paying. But to change a lot of that, because many of those things have been put into law, it requires the General Assembly, and the governor doesn't have the General Assembly. So it's a very difficult situation. Yeah,
Change the topic a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The people that live in Chicago and Cook County, doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or a non-voter. You got to be pretty darn mad with all the different fees and taxes. So now, how does Madigan or anybody, whether whoever it is, represent that group and not say no more taxes, no more fees, and start to cut? It wouldn't matter who, because I heard today they want a penny tax on an ounce of soda. I mean,
$7 for a plastic bag.
well, but the point I'm getting at is there's got to be a lot of pressure on the representatives from that area. I know if I did that here, you guys would tar and feather me, But now in Chicago, their water bill went up. They're going to have to, So, are you seeing any of that where the representatives there are saying, my district doesn't want this anymore, I can't vote for it?
That's an interest. It depends on where in the city you are. I will tell you, like in the 42nd Ward, where people are well educated and follow things and know what's happening outside the city, they're not happy with it. For a lot of folks in Chicago, they didn't know that they're paying more for their cell phones than everybody else in the state. I mean, they're just unaware of it. They didn't know that they had, cable tax. I mean, they just didn't know that stuff. So and a lot of the folks in the city, I would say a larger percentage of people in the city use services, larger percent than out here. So rather than, because of their income level, being on the side with the property tax and income tax, they will be hit with the cell phone tax, the bag tax, the soda tax, all the nickel and dime stuff. But they're not really being hit by the other things. But I have not seen any uprising at all, and people in Chicago saying no way. Now it is interesting though that the school district lost 14,000 students from last year to this year. So what does that say? People they're out of it. That's what's happening. That's how they're doing it.
Wants to come to Will County.
Yeah.
So that tells you what Cook County.
Right.
So let's go back to pensions a second. The new law that was passed that on the county side that now says that effective at the next election, unless the county votes to include people in the pension system, they're no longer eligible for the pension system. That law was supposed to have municipalities and townships in there. Now, Steve and I supported this because we haven't taken the pension since we started, because we didn't believe it should be for a part-time situation, 600 hours. Do you know why the municipalities and townships got taken out of that?
Well, I think the issue there was you had to work 1,000 hours a year in order to be eligible for the pension, and no one had been checking that. And now the law said you really need to keep track of who's getting a pension. That's a good example of money going out the door that doesn't need to be going out the door.
Right, and we agree with that, but it also says is that at the time, it said the municipality, the township, or the county had to vote to include those people that are going to be elected.
Okay.
And it pulled the township and municipality people out at the last minute, and only the county was involved.
I don't know why that
Okay.
was. Yeah, I don't know why it happened.
But it's good. We just need to include more people in it. We're actually, the county was still on 600 hours. So
Okay.
we're passing a resolution probably this month to take it to 1,000. And that's for all employees, because you're giving pension to people that work 12 hours a week.
I know.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Anyone else have a question?
Do you have any information on convention estates?
Again, that's more of a federal issue. I'm aware of it.
That's why it has to be each state, so
Right.
they should be getting around something that's been going on 2 years.
Right, but it's not really a legislative thing. I've had people come into my office and ask me about it, but I haven't, no one's really spent a lot of time on it. I know it's a states' rights issue that they're interested in, but it's not something that comes up a lot. Yes?
We've got a budget problem. I haven't heard anything from Mr. Madigan as to what he proposes to correct the issue. Have you?
No. And in fact, what he said is he doesn't even want to talk about it until after the election. Madigan is an interesting guy. He typically says as little as is possible. He rarely goes to any kind of a interactive or public meeting. You know, a lot of times people would say, well, isn't he getting near the end of his career? Doesn't he care about his legacy? And this is strictly my opinion, and you can disagree with me, but as I've observed him, I think his legacy, what he's most interested in, is being viewed as the most powerful person in Illinois for 40 years. Because, honest to Pete, I mean, the suffering that I've seen inflicted on some of the constituencies that support him, it's like, how can you do that? You know, I mean, just using school kids as pawns, it's just, it's unconscionable to me.
I received this pamphlet about, is there supposed to be some type of amendment made on, about the roads or something that we are to vote on?
Okay, so what Illinois has done is when you go and fill up your car with gas, you pay a gas tax and a sales tax on the gasoline, and that goes into the road fund. And your license plate fees, things like that, into the road fund. The idea is the road fund is supposed to be used for roads and bridges and transportation. As things have gotten tight over the years, that money's been taken out and used for other things. And so what this amendment would do is say that money has to stay for roads. Now the positive side of that is it's going to create jobs because we're going to have people working on roads and bridges and doing that kind of work. And obviously that's good for our infrastructure. The negative piece of it is it really ties the hands of the governor when you've got an emergency situation. Because if we make that a constitutional amendment, that means, you know, if you need something to keep, you know, the schools open or something that, disaster relief, you cannot touch that money.
Well, wouldn't that be an advantage? Because I think that's what got the state of Illinois into such a deep doo-doo, is because of the fact you've been able to rob from Peter to pay Paul. So if we go into specifications on certain things, we might be able to stop half of the money grab.
Right, and that is a fair point, and that's the positive side of that. Now the question is, if we take away that flexibility and there is an emergency and you need money, where do you get it? And come back to you.
Well,
So I mean, I can see both sides of the coin here.
If they do it properly, there will be an excess, because where do we get the excess money that we don't have now to go towards education, to go for this or to go for that during a certain span of time when they claim we have no money? So where do they get that money at that point?
Well, the way to get money, I mean, there's only two ways to it: taxes and fees of some sort, or grow the economy. Obviously, to the extent we grow the economy and bring more people in who are working and paying the taxes, that's the best way to do it. The good thing about the road fund amendment, as I mentioned, I think it will indeed create jobs. Will it be enough to really kickstart the economy, given the other challenges we have here in this state, where businesses are very nervous about locating here? Very nervous because of the tax structure. And if there, you know, again, if there is a situation where something happens and we need more taxes and the flexibility is tight, chances are they're going to get dinged, whether it's through an income tax or a new fee on a particular industry or product. It narrows the alternatives. That's the downside. And I don't know that there's a right answer. You are correct. That's how we got in the trouble to begin with. You know, voters are going to have to make up their mind what they think is better policy to make sure that money stays there, or to allow some flexibility, knowing it's been misused, but it, you know, hopefully shouldn't be or wouldn't be.
So there's no program that anything is earmarked for that program?
Well, I shouldn't say, the way it works, and there are laws that say we have to pay our debt. So anything we've borrowed, That's called a continuing appropriation. So when the money comes in every year from sales tax and income tax, which are the biggest things, we have to pay bonds and borrowed money. We have to pay pensions. Those are called continuing appropriations. We have to pay Medicaid, where the federal government, will not participate. But things like education are not part of that continuing appropriation.
But isn't that what the lottery was for?
Well, the lottery is this big, and we spend this much on education. So, I mean, you could say every dollar that brings the funds in through the lottery is spent ultimately on education, but it's nowhere, it's just a drop in the bucket.
And I think they did rob the lottery out of that money too.
Yeah, that goes into what's called the general fund essentially, and out of that general fund, you've got to pay the bonds, Medicaid, the pensions, plus everything else, the employees, pay for the paper we use, whatever. What this would do is set aside the gas tax money, and it couldn't be used for any of that stuff.
Speaking of roads, right now, obviously 159th Street's being done by IDOT. I'm sure everybody's concerned that we get it done as fast as possible. Is any of the budget woes going to affect the timetable of how that's going?
I don't think on 159th Street. So if you had a project that has not been gone through all the preliminary phases, yes. But even with a project like 159th, it's been in process so long that we actually do have funding. We bond still, we borrow money for the road program. And the money that would stay in that lockbox would pay those bonds back. So we would have a continuing source of way to fund big infrastructure projects.
Should be about 2.5.
Yeah.
Another year and a half before that's done. I know everybody's seen, it's been slow going on the one side, but that was all the sewer work. So that once that side gets done, the other side will go super fast because they don't need to trench and everything. They just need to bring the sewer over the other side. So another year and a half from now, we should be all good.
That's an interesting point. How much of 143rd Street is going to be in the future coming?
It's all county.
No, I don't care about the rest of the county. I care about 143rd
I'm saying
Street.
143rd is county, that's not state. That's county money that's going to build that. And it's going to be in 4 sections. So the first section will be the Bell Road section, Bell to Golden Oak. That's going to kind of start next year, but again, a lot of it depends on how fast all the land is bought up. We're getting pretty close on that section right now, but pretty much it's probably a 4-year, and I would say add another year to it. So it'll be 5 years to go from Bell Road all the way to where the new piece is on Gower there. And it'll be done in those 4 sections.
So you're happy with all the funding?
No, that's a county project. I mean, we'll be using some monies like motor fuel tax that we get. That's dedicated to roads, so money will go in for that. RTA funds, some of that money will go to that. So in a way, it's coming from the state, but it's in the county funds now, so it's all our money. We won't be looking for
And there won't be any raised barriers. Mike and I were able to get the highway commissioner to back off, so it'll be a regular 4-lane road.
And I
So
really
it's way
think,
better than the raised barriers for all of us, especially if you have a house.
I think 3-lane would be the wise one.
3 what?
3-lane should be the wise one.
Well, it's based
Going
on
north, going east, going west, in the middle
Turn.
line for turn only.
It's all based on the studies
Emergency.
of the traffic flow from 355, which of course is just increasing, so.
I actually agree with her because Will County is growing. It's growing. It's going to be the second biggest county in Illinois in the next 30 years. And shouldn't we expand those roads because we know that we're going to eventually, I mean, this town, my mom lived here her whole life. It used to be just farmland and now it's growing. It's huge.
No, it's gonna be 4 lanes.
Oh, it's going to be 4 lanes?
Yeah, 4 lanes.
Okay, I apologize.
Well, 4 lanes with a,
It was necessary, no, it's gonna be 4.
I apologize.
4 lanes and a mountable median, which means it'll be like a big bump of asphalt, so you'll be able to go on the bump and make your turns left or right, or go, if you're coming out of a driveway, we have 65 residents that actually live on 143rd Street.
Yeah,
So they'll be able to either make an eastbound or a westbound turn right from their driveway. They won't have to go down a block and make a U-turn.
Now, I had a question for you about education, Because if you look at Chicago with all the murders and all the, forget about the murders, all the people being shot that get saved because we have good medicine now. One of the main reasons for all that violence is that the people in those neighborhoods don't have any hope. They only see negative things and they have no way to get out. And if they had a better education, which they could possibly get with vouchers, is it, you know, where they could pick a school, is there any possibility that that would happen in our state where we would say, you know, pick your school and the money goes with the kid whatever school you go to?
I think it'll be a long time till we got to that simple of a system. I think the governor, myself, many Republicans support school choice. We are talking a lot about school funding right now. How much is the appropriate amount to send to schools? And how do we determine that? And then what is the role of money in funding? I mean, some of these situations you're talking about with these kids in Chicago, you know, many people could put their kids in those schools and they do okay because they don't have the support at home. So what we're talking about in many of those neighborhoods is way more than education. It's like a full wraparound social service program, which makes it very expensive. The problem is in Illinois, because we based so much of school funding on property taxes, the good news is it stays local. The bad news is wealthy communities have a lot more money to spend on education. So that's always kind of a tug when we're talking about education. You take from wealthy areas and send it to poor areas. Do we drastically reduce property taxes and go to income tax to fund education? But again, the wealthier areas, the suburban areas in particular, that's where the vast amount of income tax comes from. So you would be sending it out regardless. There is no easy answer for the school funding issue. Everybody wants to, you know, do the best we can for schools. I will say this, I mean, is the struggles that we have, a lot of people I talk to in my district think our schools do a pretty decent job on balance. I mean, there's obviously things we can always do better. But when you look at the inner city schools, when you look at some of the schools in very poor communities in Southern Cook, that's an issue. A lot of downstate schools struggle because they don't have a lot of development to fund their schools, and so the question is, how do we get them enough that they have at least adequate resources?
A lot of the problem in my mind is that the cost of a school doing business goes up every single year with all your staff, your teachers.
Yep.
You know, and if we keep doing it, giving a 2% raise every year, 2.5%,
Especially when there's no
3%.
inflation.
Well, you know, when you talk about unsustainability, what happens in 10 years after they got a 2% raise every year for 10 years? Now, the people that are paying the property taxes go, Texas looks really good now. I mean, that's kind of where we're at.
Exactly what happens. And the fact is our teacher salaries in this state are high. They are high. And that's not to say teachers don't do a great job, but we have to be realistic. Nurses do a great job too. I mean, there's a lot of people that do a good job and do a lot in school, but we need to be cognizant that, you know, $120,000 to teach PE, you know, where's the market value of that? Where's the free market when, you know, if there's an English teacher opening at Glen South, there's 800 applicants because they're paying through the nose, they have wonderful facilities, they have, you know, great parents, and then you got a district, you know, where it's not a desirable spot, they can't afford it, they don't get the best teachers. That's not a good market, I don't think, free market situation.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've been trying to do as a county is, you gotta tell people to look at the whole package. And they keep looking at salaries. It was interesting because 33C just had their budget review, and the teachers are up for a raise, and they want the same 4% they got the last 6 years in a row. And the school board is saying, you know, we're gonna go maybe 1.5%, and that's it. And they're up in arms and talking about how we're not paid right. Well, they had an analysis done, and when it came back, their package is better than any package of any surrounding school district. But they don't want to look at the full package. Same thing we're doing at the county. Look at the full package. Our deputies cost for a deputy is $161,000 a year. That's a big number.
Yeah.
But if you look at the salary, it may not seem like it's the greatest, still good, but you gotta look at all the perks and the bennies.
Right, exactly.
Well,
Do you think Senate Bill 1585 will see the light of day?
Not as it currently exists. That's the energy bill. So as I mentioned earlier, almost everything's on hold. One thing that Illinois does have going for us is we have cheap energy, which is a big input for businesses relative to other states. So the question is, how do we keep it affordable? And, you know, I think everyone agrees to the extent we can use alternative energy sources, that's a good thing. But how do we transition to those without increasing the cost significantly to take away one of the good things we do in the state?
Do you think Springfield will be helpful in, as Iowa and Missouri bring high voltage DC to the state? For them to cross the line, there has to be some regulations changed. Part of the argument on 1585 was getting them to do that. That bill doesn't move.
I don't think that bill is not going to be considered all by itself. I mean, there are several energy bills out there, and when we pass an energy bill, I think it will be a whole package. It will deal with nuclear, electric, wind and solar. It'll be an energy policy bill. It won't be one bill, and it won't be anything that's out there now.
would it be more feasible always to pass a bill as an independent bill without joining them all together? Would that sort of help get Illinois out of the ditch?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that if it was all by itself would pass, or if it was all by itself wouldn't pass in a million years. So good bills and bad bills. This is where the sort of the politicking comes in. And again, the speaker's a master at this. You know, if there's something that's very popular, he waits till that's about up for a vote, and then adds on something kind of sketchy that maybe most people wouldn't like, but that he's going to get some, you know, is making somebody happy, and then puts them together. So that is up to him. He could call bills one at a time. He doesn't.
And do you always need to make him happy and leave those in? Isn't there somebody that could take that out?
No, not if he doesn't want to take it out. And the same with the president. And you know, if the Republicans had control, it would be the same situation. We would control how the bills are put together. It's the whoever is the highest ranking person in that chamber. It's Mike Madigan in the House, John Cullerton in the Senate. And there is nobody that can just outright override them.
And it probably isn't changing for a long time unless we can get the map amendment changed or term limits.
Right, and the map amendment is, you know, the good news is that wasn't going to take effect until 2022 anyways, which, so the court struck it down. I think that the effort will come back again to remap, so that is not a lost cause.
Wasn't Madigan the one that was able to kill that bill?
Well, it was actually the Supreme Court that killed it, but think about how we do take Supreme Court justice this year. It's political. And it was 5-4. There's 5 Democrats there, 4 Republicans.
But
It's a stacked deck.
They brought it up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's already been on. Yeah.
What's your view on the automatic registration for voting? Like, I know it got voted bipartisan and everyone wanted it, and then the governor struck it down saying that there's law loopholes, even though it's the exact same law as other states have, like Washington. I know for a fact Washington has it, but there's other states that do, and it works perfectly. We don't have to worry about. I think it will be a lot better for the state. It'll save us money, and I know there's always long lines on election day because people have same day registration. Because let's be honest, we're all procrastinators. And I just want to know what's your view on it. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, let me, two things on that, and I'll address first the bill that did pass. It wasn't the governor that struck it down, it was the court that struck it down. And the reason they struck it down is they said you had to have, oh, that was same-day registration, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So that was same-day registration, and the reason they struck it down, it was only because it applied to counties over 100,000. So the argument was made, it wasn't equal.
I'm talking about automatic.
Okay, automatic. My biggest concern with that is as long as it's done and we can be confident that the people who show up to vote are the ones that actually registered, I'm good. My big issue is you know, fraud or anything like that.
Well, I mean, there's no evidence. I mean, I know about Chicago. Chicago's a whole different animal, honestly. They
Part of the state.
Yeah, but other than Chicago, I mean, or even around the country, there's been 0% of voter fraud.
Well, yeah, I mean, we certainly are doing more stuff online and with technology, so I think we're getting there. But I just think in general with election stuff, I mean, what I care about is that it's fair and square.
Election day registration was knocked down, and then that was overturned. So there will be election day. And if you do plan on registering that day, there are going to be lines. There are going to be issues. We just, you know, number one, it cost us $1.5 million initially for the primary to buy the poll books. It's from the county, which unfortunately was an unfunded mandate by the state. So it cost us $1.5 million to buy the poll books to set up for election day registration. Unfortunately, we realized that wasn't enough because even though we only had about, I forget what the number was, 700 or 800 same-day registrations, it's still a little bit more of a complicated process. You have to take the time to register the person while other people are trying to vote. So we just spent another $500,000 for more poll books. So there will be dedicated poll books, electronic poll books, just for people that are going to register.
And translators.
And translators.
If I'm correct, though, too, Ruth said she's bringing in a fourth judge for solely
There's going to be
registration. Yeah.
You know, I was a clerk here in Homer Township for a while, and I would go round and round with Nancy's office because before they had a different type of voting system, and you said there's no fraud. Well, there was fraud. We just didn't know about it because I was the clerk, and I did early voting. Now I take them ballots and I put them in my car, and I go to the counter and I turn them in. And now when I go there, well, if I stop off somewhere and I want a steamer and I open them all up and I spoil the ones I don't like and then bring them to the county, who would know? Nobody. So that system was bad. And, you know, now they have a different system that it's not like that. And when I was at the clerk's office this morning checking to make sure everything was okay, I was told that she wished everybody would vote early because that's the safest way to vote.
Right.
Because you call up the county and say, mail me a ballot, and they will mail you a ballot, and it goes to you, and then you fill it out, and they get it back, and they verify the signatures. And if the signature's not correct, they're getting rid of it or spoiling it, and you'll get a call. So that's the best way because there's less tampering, less people in the middle. The new way with the poll books and all that, you don't need ID at the polls. You know, so you walk in and you go, hey, I live over here, and you vote. So you can come in with a busload of people, and everyone votes. So
there's nothing to verify because you're not registered yet.
And then you'd say, well, they
Well, those votes go into a
You're
different
registered.
file?
They do not go in this different box, and that's the
They
problem.
don't go to provisional ballots.
They're
They're
not.
counted in the election,
They're
and
just
that's
counted.
it.
Why
They're
don't
done.
they do
And that's what's
But
bad
you
with the
have to
system.
present
Yeah, you have
ID.
You do have to present ID when
coupons
you register.
To register.
To register.
Yeah, you do.
Yes, you do, to register, but
But
that's,
not to vote.
But because it's a, I guess when you register,
If you were voting the first, if you're early voting, you need an ID.
Is there any talk about because the other problem with poll books and election day registration is The only records we could check are county records. We can't verify you didn't come over from Grundy County and voted. Is there any talk about a state database yet to be able
No,
to?
there's a real division between the parties, and you know, I would say in general, Republicans are more strict. I mean, personally, I cannot for the life of me understand why you don't have to show an ID to vote. I mean, you have to show it for everything else, and if you're, you know, that's my personal feeling. I know it may not be politically correct, that's what it is. Democrats, on the other hand, in general, want to loosen it up so anybody can vote, make it as easy to vote as possible. And the reason I don't like that, one, I do think there's a lot of potential for fraud, or saying, you know, telling people that they'll give you some sort of gift or whatever if they go in and vote, you know, the way they want to. But what I think has gotten us in trouble is that I mean, honestly, I wish uninformed people would stay home. I mean, I think that's our worst enemy. It's people that don't pay attention, or they make up their mind on one 60-second commercial. I mean, you're here tonight listening to some detail about how this stuff works, about energy policy, about pensions. I mean, you know what? I love people like you, even if you don't agree with me on something. I wish everyone was informed like that, but they are not. And that's, I mean, not just the state. Look at what's happening at the federal level. I mean, people need to understand their vote matters and take it seriously. It kills me that, you know, especially in the Lamont portion of my district, I have a lot of immigrants, lots of immigrants. I will tell you, the ones that are naturalized citizens, they are so much better informed than the average citizen, because they come here and they take this seriously. And they go through the trouble to be naturalized and to register to vote, and they inform themselves. I mean, it's just shocking to me. They are generally, and of course I'm generalizing, but generally way better informed than people that were born and raised here.
How are you?
Good.
First of all, I want to say thank you for all the years that you've showed my support as a constituent. I've seen this lady in action. She's one of the hardest working people I've ever seen. I guess my question is, having been a state employee all those years and really involved in the process, what more can people like us do? Because we got to get over this hump.
I know.
I mean, I know both sides got to see that we're at that. And what more can be done?
Well, you know, again, I go back to this idea, and again, not just for the state, but, you know, for democracy in general, in people educating themselves. And, you know, we don't like to talk about policy or politics of parties, but, you know, maybe we need to have those discussions with our friends and family. I mean, what we need to learn how to do is not be nasty and, you know, take it personally, but just something like, well, like we talked about with the lockbox amendment. You know, this is one side, but, you know, here's another side. You know, you decide what you think is more important. But a lot of people that come to the polls, I mean, they're just, they think and they vote the way they've been told to do. And it's just, it's mind-boggling. The schools, I think, is the place where that needs to start. But yeah, I mean, maybe we need to start talking to our friends and family more about it. I wish it was easier.
I'm going to be a teacher in some school. I'm going to teach cursive writing. You know, and how to read cursive. So that'll be a foreign language pretty soon.
No, you got it wrong. It's just how to write properly.
Yeah.
If you look at it, they cannot even write the alphabet properly. School is terrible.
It's all in this thing. You gotta
Very,
do the right job.
So is there same-day registration or not?
In counties, but only in counties over 100,000. I think that's the law that was passed. So if you live in a small county, there is no same-day registration.
What's the difference?
Well, that's why the initial court struck it down. The difference is the small county said, we can't afford to do this. We can't implement it. And so the legislature said, okay, then we're only going to impose it on big counties. And then the court said, well, that's not fair to the person that happens to live in a small county. They're being treated differently than someone who lives in a big county. But then it went back to court, and that was overturned, and they said for this election, the law will stand. So if you live in a large county, there is same-day registration.
Fortunately, some of the big companies couldn't afford it either.
Yeah.
So we got to come up with $2 million, $1.5 million last year, $500,000 this year, which had to get cut out of other line items to be able to do this.
the only advantage is for same-day registration that day, the lines will be so long, they'll get disgusted and leave.
And that did happen at the primary.
And
We
that
did
will
lose.
be
I watched
the
in a
only
precinct where
advantage.
people walked away.
Yeah.
The only advantage for early.
Mike, your recollection, what was, going back in time, any which way, what was the largest Will County voter turnout, percentage-wise?
Oh, percentage? I'm gonna say 58. I'm gonna say 58.
I personally tried to get about 25 to 30 people to come here tonight.
No, it's.
Right.
I didn't make it. They're just, she's right. Most of them are just not interested,
Yeah.
which is sad.
I think people feel that no matter what they do,
Yeah, exactly.
they can't win.
Yeah.
And that's indicative of what's going on with the presidential
National.
race and the local races. You know, I go out and talk to them and say, well, we're out doing a lot of stuff to help you. And they don't even know. And then when you tell them, they're shocked that somebody's actually trying to help them. But for the most part, not everybody, like Christine says, it's not all of them. But there's a overwhelming number of people that just feel that it don't matter who's elected, they're getting screwed one way or the other. The government is out to get them, and the only way to survive is to sell their house and move, but they're afraid to sell their house because they lose too much money, because their houses are worth so much less. And that's what I'm hearing when people actually talk about that topic at the door. It's a feeling of, I guess, you know, if you're in psychology, you call it hopelessness and despair, and that's kind of almost where they're at.
Yeah. 'Cause in January, Jennifer Walling was more than enthusiastic to come up here from Springfield to talk to the Environmental Committee. The reason being is nobody ever asks her. It's the truth. You look around you. I mean, how many people here are really interested in the issues or even know what the issues are?
Now look at Springfield, what do you expect? I'm sorry, but that's.
Well, I know when
that's it.
okay, which one comes first, you know, the horse or the cart here? If the citizens don't start to get more interested in what it is,
What, civil
you're
disobedience?
never going to get them interested down there.
How are you gonna do it? Civil disobedience? That
Take
seems,
some more money and
that
go.
seems to be the only thing that's been going on with Black Lives Matter and all these other ones. If they don't come out there and do something, nothing gets done. So what are we that are interested, what can we do?
Well, again, I wish there was like a 3-point plan I could give you. I can't. I mean, it's as he said, he tried to get a bunch of people to come out. It's hard to do. I don't, you know, they don't necessarily view it as important or important to their life. And so, and even if they do come out, you wonder, are they coming for the right reason? So I think, again, it's a matter of education, starting with our young people. Somehow train them up in a way that some of the immigrants that we have in this country, and take the time for naturalization, recognize the importance and the system of government we have and how fortunate they are to have it. But people just take it for granted. And then they complain about it.
Thanks for coming out, Chris, we really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
And you guys are informed, because somebody should talk.
Well, never hesitate to call if you have another question. I mean, I think all of the elected officials in the area feel that way.
Right, yeah. And Senator's office is right down the road, on Lamont Road.
Johnny has a question.
Yeah, John.
One more question on
Yeah.
that amendment to use the transportation tax
Right.
for roads and bridges. In this village, last year, we passed a excise tax, 3 cents a gallon on gasoline delivered to the stations in Homer Glen. Will that be affected with this?
No, that's a local tax, so you guys are getting to keep that here.
Okay.
So that wouldn't be affected.
Because we designated for parks.
Right.
Not for transportation,
Right.
not for roads, not for
This
bridges.
is a state gas tax and state sales tax on gas that we're talking about.
Yeah, this is money that stays in the state coffers for them to do that, not the county.
That's why we made it local. That's why we
Smart.
made it excise. So we'll go to the state and then try to.
Come back, yeah.
Yeah.
You, turnout expected to be pretty low for the GOP in this upcoming election. It will probably leave Culleton and Madigan with majorities and supermajorities. Does the governor expect to change his stance at all on his turnaround agenda? He wants to suppress union, bankrupt the Chicago public schools. There's no budget getting done, and he's a big part of that. I'm wondering, if you're one of the leaders, can you talk to this guy and say, hey, you know, this has not worked for 2 years, it's going nowhere, and you're a big part of it?
Well, because I don't believe that, having been in a lot of those meetings. I've sat there as a leader with Jim Durkin, who's my counterpart in the House, Mike Madigan, and John Cullerton. And the governor has said, okay, let's talk about some of these issues. What could you accept? And stone wall. I mean, Madigan is not going to do anything because he doesn't think he needs to. And he thinks that come the election, if they continue, they may not have super majorities in both chambers, but they will most likely have majorities in both chambers. Madigan's willing to wait another 2 years to the gubernatorial.
Do you think the governor has shown some flexibility on this?
Oh my gosh, I've seen him, you know, change his position. Sometimes I just want to tell him, stop, you're negotiating against yourself. You know, he's trying to be so, you know, compromising, and he's met with a brick wall.
I think the question is, what is Michael Madigan willing to take off the table? No one seems to want to ask that because they know the answer already. It's nothing.
Sure. He's put together governor's budgets with Ryan, Edgar, and Thompson, right? But this guy cannot put together anything with him.
Right, and Edgar, Thompson, and Ryan were super deal makers. But here's the problem. The deals get made for all the special interest groups. And the problem we're having today is all those deals were made, and whether you're a Republican or Democrat, unless you're in with the in crowd, you are paying the cost of all these special deals. So the difference with this governor is he says, we're not raising taxes unless we get some change. And that's where Madigan has said, not going to happen. Cullerton, on the other hand, I believe would be more amenable to some sort of agreement or moving forward. That's just his style. But Madigan has not been willing to compromise one iota. And I fear that he'll just stick with that stance going forward. And then what do we do? What does the governor do? Cave? And we just raise taxes and nothing changes? That's really not acceptable, I don't think. The Democrats, with their supermajorities, could do anything they want. I mean, they can override the governor. Why don't they? Because they know darn well their constituents don't want this. So, you know, the real final solution is to move Madigan off the mark and get him to engage. Just at least engage. He won't even talk about the issues. Yeah, it's an amazing process to witness.
But I really think that would be a good policy for the governor to actually veto it and make people come out and see and make Madigan override it.
Well,
and
he
make
did. I mean, the governor did veto the budget. He vetoed several bills. And they were not able to override it because even with their supermajorities, they were afraid the voters wouldn't put them back in.
Right. And that said, I mean, the Republicans in themselves haven't really brought it out what they are doing to even encourage people to say, well, maybe this governor is trying to do something good for the people and get to it.
Yeah, he don't say too much. You don't see him out explaining his issues or his position, except now on the road tax. But,
You mean you don't see the media covering,
That's
saying that? I mean, that's where I'm going to come to all the time. If the media doesn't cover him, he talks a lot. We see him talk a lot. We see him a lot. He talks a lot. They don't put him on the news.
Didn't he start out with 15 items on his agenda, and now he's down to 5? I mean, come on. If he's not trying to negotiate...
Stop negotiating against yourself. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
that's not a good
somebody
policy.
say he's priest.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yes, and I'm going to change this totally, completely to something else.
And I wish I was better prepared because I don't know the number of the legislative
Oh,
bill.
I probably don't know it either.
Yeah, I know. But it was a bill that said that pharmacists and medical staff did not have an opportunity or did not have, they couldn't exercise their conscience by expressing or removing themselves from a situation where they didn't want to be in, especially when it comes to abortions and abortifacients. And there was a bill out there that there was no freedom for them to exercise their moral conscience. Where is that bill at this time?
Well, the rub in that bill was they could exercise their conscience, but they had to make a referral or refer the individual to someone who would do.
Oh, okay, so they could remove themselves from
Correct.
the situation.
But the rub was they have to make the referral, and they were not happy with that.
Oh.
That bill did pass, and the governor did sign it, and it's just something people disagree on. There's no, we tried to accommodate both sides.
Can you explain to me what did pass, the fact that?
So, for example, if you were a pharmacist and you had someone came in with a prescription for the morning after pill, which would be considered just someone abortifacient, then the pharmacist, if he didn't want to dispense it, could say, I'm not doing this, but they can't walk away. Then they've got to refer them to someone that would.
Okay, so at this point they can't step away?
You can exercise your right of conscience, but you have to refer it.
Refer it to another?
Right.
And that's where there's a...
Right, that's where there's the rub.
I see. So the bill is there where they can remove themselves from the
Right,
situation.
right. We do not make anybody actually perform an abortion or dispense something they're opposed to.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Did you have another question?
Do you support or endorse Donald Trump?
Oh man, that is a situation that's changing by the minute. I'll tell you, honestly, I'm waiting to see what happens. What I like about Donald Trump is I think he gives voice to all the anger and frustration that people have, and that's why I think Rauner was successful. I certainly don't endorse or support the way he conducts himself. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. I'm seeing what's happening like we all are. I'm very concerned about his ability, his fitness to be president, to be honest. I'm very worried about that. So, again, we've got another debate to go. I'm just going to see how this thing unfolds.
I'm more worried about Hillary's
That's what I was
emails that she has actually destroyed.
She's been in an neighborhood, no
Oh,
question.
terrible.
I do a newspaper, if anyone don't know that, so I read a lot of stuff. Got a useless vat of information, and I've been reading WikiLeaks. Now, if you read that stuff, you just go wikileaks.com and start reading it, and then when you're done reading it, Trump is not a Sunday school teacher, and he's never going to be, and he talks like a lot of guys did in high school, and I don't agree with none of that stuff. But read WikiLeaks and all the stuff that's being said about Christians and Jews, and then read stuff about Benghazi. Read all these different lies that are perpetrated on us through the media, who in WikiLeaks, they have the emails that Clintons are telling the media what to write. So when you see all that, Donald Trump's behavior, or whatever you want to call it, it goes away. And then you look at it and you go, you got this guy who, if you take all the adjectives and adverbs and the hand gestures away, he's saying stuff that most of the people like against illegal immigration. He wants to vet the refugees. He doesn't want to raise taxes. He wants to get rid of Obamacare and make something different. You go down the list, take the adjectives, adverbs out, and what do you have? And then you read about Hillary, who every sentence is saying one thing, and then in WikiLeaks is showing you that she's lying. And I don't think that's baloney. And they blame the Russians because they're convenient. I don't know if Russians did it, or if a guy in China did it, or if a guy in Cuba did it. Or like he said, a fat guy in a bed. I mean, nobody knows. So, when you really look at it, I'm for Trump. And that's why.
Yeah, I'm just worried a lot of people are just going to stay home because they don't like either choice. And that's going to be a big problem, again, for us at the state side. So,
Yeah, but Obama's gotten away with a lot too.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
going out the door.
That's bad. And how he's going along with this voting stuff with Hillary and the Gore's out there, that loser. Come on, what's going on? Mr. Green.
Well, that's why it's even more important this year to make sure you go out and if you can't deal with the presidential situation, you gotta vote your local elections.
Right.
Because your municipal, your county, your state people affect more of your daily life if you live in this state and in this county than the national people do.
Yeah,
Your taxes, your real estate taxes, that's affected by us at the county.
But when the top man says, we don't care anymore what you're going to do, and they start changing those laws, it doesn't matter. It could be the ant on the ground. It will change.
No, you can't change it by himself. You shouldn't be able to. So hopefully we stop that.
yes.
I see Raumer is promoting or trying to put out a petition for term limits. What do you think the possibility of that happening is? Nothing.
Because
What
it
about
would
a
have.
term limit on how long you can serve as Speaker of the House in Illinois?
I would support term limits on leadership positions. I would.
And that's kind of
But the thing is, this whole term limit discussion is about one guy. I mean, when you look at most of the leaders that have, you know, sifted through, most of them haven't been in that position anywhere near that long. And when you look at the turnover in the General Assembly, it's a lot. I mean, people don't stay around typically for 40 years. They don't. He's unique.
He's not the longest serving, I think, in the United States.
he is. He
For
is.
a House Speaker.
How old is he?
74, 3 or 4, I think.
3 or 4.
So the president steps out.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Love talking to people that care. Thank you.